All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We got a really interesting request for this one.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Forrest Gump.
Okay, classic.
Huge, right.
Yeah.
But most folks, well, they kind of think of it as just like a heartwarming story, feel good.
Right.
But you guys, our listeners, you requested a real deep dive into like the hidden depths of this film. And, well, you're right. There is a lot more going on beneath the surface here.
Absolutely. Tons to unpack.
So we've got some seriously insightful analysis here. So get ready, folks, to see this classic film, Forrest Gump, in a whole new light.
Yeah, I think what's so fascinating about Forrest Gump is how it manages to deal with all these, like, really complex historical events, right? Vietnam, Watergate, the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do it by taking a strong, like, political stance.
Right.
It does it through Forrest's innocence.
It's true. It's almost like his naivety is like a Trojan horse in a way.
Totally.
Sneaking in these huge questions about American history and society without ever, getting all preachy about it.
Yeah, exactly. Think about that scene where Forrest meets President Kennedy. I mean, it's played for laughs, right? You're highlighting Forrest's, like, childlike wonder.
Right.
But it also kind of subverts that typical, reverence we usually have surrounding a historical figure like that.
Yeah, and it makes us, the audience, kind of reconsider the weight of that moment, not just as some big political event, but also as just a human encounter.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole Watergate thing, the scene where Forrest, without even knowing, totally exposes the scandal. It's funny, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's also, like, subtly critiquing the corruption and all the paranoia of that whole era.
Absolutely. It's really clever how they did that. Okay, so we've got Forrest as this innocent observer, right?
Yeah.
But the film also, it really grapples with this age-old question of fate versus free will. Like you have Forrest, Lieutenant Dan, and Jenny, and they each seem to represent a different approach to this whole dilemma. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you've got Forrest, who just seems to, like, embody that whole idea of going with the flow, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, his life is just this series of improbable events. I mean, becoming a ping pong champion, accidentally investing in Apple. It's wild.
Yeah.
It almost feels like he's, being guided by some unseen hand.
Yeah, which totally connects back to his mama's famous line.
Right. Oh, of course.
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Simple analogy, right?
Sure.
But it speaks to this much deeper philosophical question, right? Is our path kind of predetermined, or do we actually have the power to shape our own destiny?
Yeah, and that's where the film gets really, really interesting, I think. Because it doesn't just present Forrest's perspective, right? You have Lieutenant Dan, who, at least initially, totally clings to this rigid belief in his, preordained military destiny. Like, his whole story becomes a study in letting go of that control and learning to embrace the unexpected.
His bitterness after losing his legs in Vietnam, his struggle to even accept that Forrest saved him, it's all tied to this idea of, like, wrestling with fate.
Yeah.
He's literally fighting against what he sees as, like, this disruption of his predetermined path.
Absolutely. And then you have Jenny, right? Her life is just, it's shaped by trauma,
Yeah.
which leads her down this path of escapism, self-destruction, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Her story, I think, brings up all these questions about how much, our past experiences, the stuff we can't control, how much that actually influences the choices we make and the paths we take.
It's heartbreaking, watching her struggle, especially because you see how much she cares for Forrest. But she's also running from something deep within herself.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, is she truly free to make different choices?
Mm-hmm.
Or is she, like, trapped by all that trauma that haunts her?
That's a heavy question. And the film doesn't, offer any easy answers.
Yeah.
It's more about presenting these different perspectives and letting the audience kind of grapple with the complexities.
Exactly. And that's what makes Forrest Gump more than just, like, a heartwarming story. It's a film that invites us to really think deeply about life's big questions, to consider the roles of chance, choice, the lasting impact of our past, all of it.
So we have these three characters, right? Each one navigating life in their own way, bumping up against fate, making choices, and ultimately shaping their own destinies, however messy or unexpected those journeys might be.
For sure.
And it's through their interconnected stories that the film, I think, really explores the nuances of the American dream. Because on the surface, you wouldn't really expect someone like Forrest with, his perceived limitations to achieve any kind of, real success. Yet he does. And in a way that kind of challenges that traditional pull yourself up by your bootstraps narrative.
Right.
His success with the shrimping business, the Apple stock, it all just seems to happen by chance, like a series of fortunate accidents.
Yeah, it's like the film is saying, what if success isn't always about chasing it, but about just being open to the possibilities,
Mm.
about following your own path, however unconventional it might be?
Which brings us right back to that question of fate versus free will, right?
Mhm.
Is Forrest simply lucky? Or does his unwavering kindness, his optimism, does that somehow draw good fortune into his life?
Hmm. That's a question worth pondering. And it's something, we'll continue to explore as we kind of delve deeper into the layers of Forrest Gump. But before we do, I think maybe we should shift gears a little and take a closer look at how the film uses visual storytelling to weave its magic.
The way they seamlessly inserted Forrest into all that historical footage using CGI, that was groundbreaking at the time.
It was totally.
It creates this uncanny sense that he's actually present at these pivotal moments in history.
And it goes beyond just like a technical achievement, right? It reinforces the film's themes of, fate and chance. It blurs the lines between reality and fiction in this way that makes you question the very nature of, truth and perception.
It's like the film is saying, what if Forrest really was there, shaping events in ways we never even imagined?
Exactly. And then there's the music, which is so much more than just a soundtrack. It's an integral part of the storytelling. Alan Silvestri's score, with its recurring themes and emotional swells, it just perfectly captures the film's blend of whimsy, tragedy, and ultimately, hope.
And you can't forget that curated mix of classic songs from, like, each decade. It's not just background music. It's a sonic time capsule that immerses you in the era, and it adds another layer of emotional resonance.
It's true.
It's all so brilliantly crafted, from the visuals to the music, that it works on like a subconscious level. It draws you into Forrest's world and makes you feel those emotions right alongside him.
Totally agree.
So we have this incredible blend of historical events, philosophical questions, and, just masterful filmmaking. It's no wonder Forrest Gump continues to resonate with audiences decades later. But I think there's one more layer we need to kind of peel back before we move on, and that's the complex, often heartbreaking relationship between Forrest and Jenny.
Oh, absolutely. Their love story is so far from, a fairy tale. It's this roller coaster of emotions filled with, like, missed connections, unrequited love, and that lingering impact of childhood trauma.
Forrest's unwavering devotion to Jenny is both, heartwarming and at times almost painful to watch. You want her to, fully reciprocate his love, to just choose the simple happiness he offers.
But Jenny's journey it's so much more complicated than that. She's constantly seeking escape, trying to outrun her past, making choices that lead her down these dangerous paths.
And yet, in her own way, she loves Forrest, too. It's a love that's burdened by her pain, her need to heal before she can really open herself to that kind of unconditional love that he offers.
Right.
Which brings us to that really poignant moment when she finally returns to him, admitting she needs him. But by then, it's almost too late.
It is.
Their final reunion is so bittersweet, a reminder that sometimes even the most devoted love can't conquer all of life's obstacles. But before we dive too deeply into that emotional roller coaster, we need to take a step back and consider the broader context of their relationship, How does their story reflect the social and cultural upheavals of that time? How did their individual journeys intersect with, and maybe even comment on, the changing landscape of America?
Yeah, that's where things get really fascinating. Because through the lens of their relationship, the film offers this subtle commentary on issues of, gender roles, social change, and the complexities of navigating love and loss in a world that's constantly evolving.
Yeah, it's interesting how Forrest Gump kind of like puts Forrest and Jenny's relationship right up against all those major cultural shifts,
Yeah.
like the rise of the counterculture movement and how the roles of women in society were changing.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jenny's journey, especially, it really reflects that struggle for self-discovery and liberation a lot of women were going through back then. Her desire to break free from, all those societal expectations, exploring different lifestyles, pursuing personal fulfillment, it all mirrors the broader feminist movement of the time.
And the film doesn't like shy away from how complicated that journey is.
No, not at all.
I mean, Jenny faces setbacks, she makes choices that lead to pain, and her search for happiness, well, it's full of obstacles.
Which is what makes her story so relatable, I think. It acknowledges that the path to, liberation isn't always clear-cut. It's often messy and full of challenging.
Right. And then you have Forrest, who kind of represents a more traditional, almost chivalrous view of love and relationships.
Yeah.
He never wavers in his affection for Jenny, accepting her flaws, welcoming her back time and time again, no matter what she's been through.
His love for her is pure and unconditional, which, I guess, you could see as both admirable and, well, some might say a bit naive.
Right, because it makes you wonder, does Forrest really understand how deep Jenny's struggles are? Or is he just projecting his own, idealized version of her onto the real complex woman she's become?
It's a tough question. And the film doesn't really offer any easy answers. It leaves it open to interpretation, inviting us to think about the different sides of their love story and how their journeys, both personal and societal, shape their connection.
And speaking of those societal journeys, the film also touches on how the American dream was evolving. Forrest, in his own, unconventional way, achieves this level of success that a lot of people aspire to.
He does. War hero, successful entrepreneur, pop culture icon.
But he never actually sets out to achieve any of it. It all just kind of falls into his lap.
Which, yeah, it does challenge that traditional idea of the American dream as something you got to strive for, something you earn through hard work and ambition. Forrest's success is more serendipitous, like a series of lucky accidents that happen because he's just in the right place at the right time, often without even realizing it.
It's like the film is asking, what if success isn't always about chasing after it, but about being open to those possibilities, about following your own path, even if it's unconventional?
And maybe it's also suggesting that real happiness, true happiness, isn't necessarily tied to like material success or achievements, but to something more fundamental like human connection, kindness, living a life that's true to yourself.
Which brings us back to Forrest's, almost childlike innocence. It's not just a narrative device, it's a defining part of him, allowing him to navigate a world that's complex and often turbulent with a sense of wonder and optimism.
Exactly. And it's that innocence that makes him such a compelling character, I think. In a world that can feel so cynical and disillusioned, Forrest's unwavering belief in people, seeing the beauty in the simple things, it's both refreshing and thought-provoking.
It does make you wonder, is Forrest just really lucky? Or does that optimistic outlook, his genuine kindness, does that somehow create like a ripple effect, attracting good things into his life?
Ooh, now that's a question that goes beyond the film itself. It touches on some pretty deep philosophical, maybe even spiritual concepts. The interconnectedness of things, the power of positive energy, the idea that, what's going on inside us can actually influence our external reality.
Like that saying, what you focus on expands. Maybe Forrest focus on the good, on believing in the best of humanity. Maybe that creates a kind of magnetic force that draws those positive experiences to him.
It's an intriguing idea. And while the film doesn't really come right out and endorse any one belief system, it definitely opens the door to those kinds of interpretations.
And I think that's one of the things that makes Forrest Gump such a timeless film. It's not just a story, it's a catalyst for these bigger conversations, exploring questions about life, fate, the very nature of human existence.
It really encourages us to think beyond what we see on the surface, to look for those hidden layers of meaning, those little nuances we might have missed the first time around.
And to appreciate the power of storytelling to connect with us emotionally, to make us laugh, cry, think, and ultimately see the world, maybe even ourselves, in a new light.
And as we get to the final part of our deep dive, I think it's worth thinking about one more layer, the symbolism in Forrest Gump. Because throughout the film, certain images and motifs keep popping up, adding depth and asking us to look beyond just the literal events happening on screen.
Like that feather floating on the breeze at the beginning and the end. Such a simple image, but it really brings up this sense of both randomness and destiny. Like maybe our lives are shaped by chance, but also guided by some unseen force.
Exactly. And then there's Forrest's running, which becomes more than just a physical act. It represents his journey through life, his perseverance, his ability to keep moving forward even when things are tough.
It's almost as if he's running towards something, but he's not quite sure what. Driven by a sense of purpose, even if that purpose is kind of elusive.
And you have the bench, which keeps showing up. A place of contemplation, a symbol of Forrest's willingness to just sit and watch the world go by, to take it all in without judging.
The bench becomes like a meeting point, a place where paths cross, stories are shared, connections are made, and lost and found again.
Yeah, it's a nice reminder that life is a journey, a collection of moments. And sometimes the most profound insights come not from, striving or searching, but from just being present, observing and letting life unfold.
And as we get to the end of our deep dive, I can't help but think about that last scene. Forrest sitting on the bench, watching his son get on the school bus. Such a mix of emotions there: pride, nostalgia, maybe even a little sadness.
Yeah, it's a reminder that time keeps moving, that life is constantly changing. But even as things change, there's beauty in the continuity, in passing the torch to the next generation.
And it leaves us with that question: what will Forrest's son's journey be like? Will he, inherit his dad's innocence and optimism? Or will he forge his own path, shaped by a world that's so different from the one Forrest knew?
And maybe that's the ultimate message of Forrest Gump. It's not just about one man's extraordinary life. It's an invitation for all of us to think about our own journeys, to appreciate how everything's connected, to embrace the unpredictable nature of fate, and find those moments of grace and wonder that make life worth living.
It's a film that stays with you, prompting you to look at the world with fresh eyes, to question your assumptions and remember that even amidst all the chaos and uncertainty, there's always room for kindness, compassion, and a little bit of magic.
Yeah.
As we've been talking about all these layers of Forrest Gump, it's made me think about something the analysis pointed out: the film's lasting impact on pop culture.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty amazing, like how certain lines and images from the film have just become, part of our everyday language, part of how we think.
Totally. Like you hear "life is like a box of chocolates" or "run, Forrest, run," and it's instant. You're right back in that world.
It just goes to show how the film connects with people. On a gut level, those phrases aren't just like catchy. They bring up all sorts of feelings.
Nostalgia, hope, that sense of wonder, even a bit of melancholy. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of why Forrest Gump still resonates with people, across different generations. It taps into something universal about being human.
That search for meaning, hoping for something good, even when life throws you those curveballs.
And yeah, amidst all the chaos, all the complexity, the film gives you this sense of comfort, like a little reminder that, simple kindness, perseverance, those things can make a difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have one last question for you and for anyone listening. What is it about Forrest Gump that makes it such a timeless classic? Why do we keep coming back to it even all these years later?
I think it's that unique mix of simplicity and depth. On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, almost whimsical. But then underneath, there's so much meaning. It explores those big themes like love and loss, destiny, the search for happiness.
It's both heartwarming and thought-provoking at the same time, funny and heartbreaking. It makes you laugh, cry, question your beliefs about everything.
And in the end, I think it offers hope. Hope that even in a world that can feel pretty crazy and unpredictable, there's still room for kindness, for connection, for those moments of grace that make it all worthwhile.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys are the ones you never see coming. And that even with all the big events of history swirling around, it's the small human moments that really count.
It really is.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Forrest Gump. We hope you enjoyed exploring all those layers of this amazing film with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on this one.
And until next time, keep watching, keep thinking, and keep those deep dive requests coming. We'll catch you in the next episode.